This episode of UK Low Carb Podcast is sponsored by Deliciously Guilt-Free. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to UK Low Carb. I've literally just finished. That's why I thought I'd record this now. An absolutely superb episode of the show, and it's a very different show. I always say that, don't I? I always say it's a very different show to normal, but this one genuinely is for a very different reason. So I'm talking to somebody who's not a low carb expert, who's not a keto expert at all. In fact, they're probably quite new to the idea of low carbohydrate diets. But I'm speaking to Dr. Trevor Gedeon, and that's because in the summer this year, I did actually read this book. So I'm holding it up for the YouTube audience, but you won't be able to see that if you're listening, obviously. It's the Chimp Paradox, this book by Professor Steve Peters, and I read this in the summer, and I thought it was such a good book because it explains how our mind works. So it breaks down this brain into different parts based on the limbic system, the chimp, the core frontal lobes, I think they're called. I'm not an expert in this, as you can tell, which is the human brain, and also the computer. Now, I won't go into all that because when you've got an expert on your show describing it, why would I ruin it by going into it myself? However, Dr. Trevor Gedeon was so brilliant on this show. I really enjoyed it. And he kind of goes through the first half is more or less breaking down this chimp paradox in our minds and how it all works and how we work. And you can also, I think, as you're hearing him speak, relate this to your own life. And I cringeworthily share some of my own experiences because I think it's important to be vulnerable and share sometimes when your chimp has won the day. Well, certainly temporarily won. And then we relate that to our food choices and how it is that our food shapes the way that we see things, how it is that maybe we do things that our brains don't want to do, our human brains don't want to do, and yet the chimp wins. And so we go into that as well. Anyway, it's a brilliant interview. I don't want to get in the way of it too much. So I'm just going to hand over now to that interview and wish you all a really, really great weekend. Whatever you're up to, stay safe. And thank you so much for supporting the show. Just want to say in particular, we've had some really lovely tweets recently of some transformation stories. And people have thanked me for that. And as part of the troop we're part of, to use the language on this show, part of the group we're part of, the community, the fact that that's helped them on their journey is just incredible. And your stories inspire me. So this show is never, I've got all the answers, listen to what I say. We're in this together and we're all learning from each other and we're all supporting each other. And I hope this episode, in all its difference, will help you to understand how you work and help you with some strategies to get through this crazy experience that is life with a highly evolved human animal brain. Anyway, take care, everyone. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Right, it's now time to hand over to Dr. Trevor Gedeon. Well, a few months ago, I was really, really blown away by a book that I actually heard mentioned by the author, Prof. Steve Peters, on another podcast. And for those who are watching on video, it's this one here called The Chimp Paradox. And it kind of really had a big impact on me. And I decided to then look at, the Chimp Management program and start talking to them. And they very kindly put up one of their expert speakers to come and join me on the show. And that's why I'm now joined by Dr. Trevor Gedeon. Hi, Dr. Trevor. Welcome to UK Low Carb.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. And, okay, we always have, not always, but we quite often have people who are from the low carb space, whether that's somebody like myself who is just following this way of life or somebody who is also following, but on top of that is an expert in nutrition, in the food science that goes into our nutrition. And even though we talk about quite often the psychology and the spirituality around food and what it means to us as human beings, when I read this book, the Chimp Paradox, the Mind Management, I just thought, you know what, this book really sort of spoke to me about how I work as a person. And I thought it'd be such a good idea to get you guys on. And I'm so, so pleased that they sent you, because you are an expert in this field, to talk a bit about us as humans and how we work. So Can you just tell me firstly a bit about your background and what sort of doctor are you?
So I'm it's great being here. Certainly not an expert in the low carb world. That's all quite new to me. So I'm by background a consultant forensic psychiatrist. So I'm a medical doctor by background. That's where I know Steve from. And we were talking this morning. I think I've known Steve for 17 years now. Wow. So right back from med school, and then I've gone on subspecialized in working with mental illness, and working part-time NHS parts in the part with Chimp Management.
Great. So Chimp Management's the company that goes along with this book, the Chimp Paradox, right? So what is it that the company does? How is it you work with people? What is it that you do?
So we do. See, the model's been developed by Steve. It's based on neuroscientific principles, and it gives us what I think is a really accessible way of understanding the mind and working with the mind, and recognizing actually that lots of us have day-to-day difficulties and day-to-day struggles, which might not kind of hit that threshold of being a mental illness, but is still getting in the way of us achieving what we want in life and still affecting our quality of life and whatever aspect of life it is. So there's a diversity about that. So Steve developed the model, found it was helping people. It gained notoriety and helping in the world of elite sport. And then the company sort of grew from there. So we now, I don't know how many of us there are at the moment. There are, I think in total there's around about 50 employees, but there's sort of front of house, back of house, if you like. But we do one-to-one work with individuals, just helping them with whatever difficulty they might be, or helping them excel in whatever area they might want. But we work within elite sport. We work with public sector organisations, healthcare, police. We work with corporate organisations. We're doing quite a bit of work in schools at the moment. It's quite diverse as a group in terms of where we're helping and what we're doing.
Amazing. And you know what? I'm going to take us back now to the Enlightenment. So when I was teaching government politics, we used to teach about liberalism as a philosophical movement. And one of the kind of core principles is that humans are rational, self-sufficient beings who know what's in their own best interest. That was like a tenet of philosophy of liberalism. And even though I believe in that, I do believe we're rational to some extent. However, the thing about the Chimp Paradox I love, and about what you're going to talk about today, is actually how we work as people, because this is what I mean. My kind of whole interest is human evolution. And I kind of think, we sometimes forget that we are evolved creatures who have had millions of years, and we have common ancestors who are, apes now. We're apes as well, just very advanced apes. And of course, we are a mixture of that animal and also human that makes us special. And by learning how we work, and that's what the book taught me, we're able to kind of strategize better to make sure we live a kind of happy, more balanced life. So can you just tell us how is the brain made up? And using the sort of words from the Chimp Paradox, what is going on in terms of relationship with the different parts of our brain?
Yeah, so the sort of fundamental sort of tenet of the model, if you like, is that there is this difference, and we don't often see this difference. We don't often make this separation, but there is a difference between the real us, so this sort of that sort of more logical, sort of fact-based part of us. If you want to sort of put it down on paper, think about everything that you want to be and everything that you want to achieve. That's the real us. And this other part of our brain, which is in the book, we talk about our human, the real us, versus our chimp and the computer. And we get that really mixed up. We get those two systems really muddled up. And that's when you get people coming forward saying that, oh, I'm feeling really sad, I'm feeling really low, I'm really struggling with this, I've got loads of anxiety. Well, you don't. You don't have those difficulties. If I asked you right now to just, put your hand up and wave, you just make a simple choice and you put your hand up and you wave, and that's it. But if I was to turn around and say, well, stop being sad, it's not as simple as that. There's something getting in the way. Or if I was to say, well, eat healthily, it's not as simple as just saying do it and then just it happens. There's something that gets in the way. And the part of us that perhaps gets in the way is this chimp part of us. And being able to understand and separate those differences, understanding that these two different systems work in a very different way, is really key to being able to try and work with it and try and manage it. So
wow.
The real
that I find incredible, because we're evolved creatures, right? So there is this kind of animal, quick, fiery response to something that happens to you, but there's also equally in your brain, although it's actually weaker, although it tends to come along later after the reaction, right? This logical, planning ahead, aspirational part of us. And also in terms of the human brain, we can think about months, weeks, years into the future of planning, whereas the animal chimp part of us is very much in the here and now.
Here and now, and focused on survival. I need to survive right here and now. And it does link back to, I suppose in an evolutionary sense, this part of us that's kept us going and has kept us alive. So that part of our brain is really quite successful at keeping us safe. It's really quite successful about survival. But we no longer live in that jungle. We no longer sort of have those same pressures around us. But that part of our brains is still there. And a good way of looking at it is thinking about, because the parts of the brain that we're talking about here, so by and large, what we're talking about is your human being this thinking part of our brain, more predominantly kind of our frontal lobe and those sort of thinking centers, and the chimp being more kind of the limbic areas, if you like. When you're a child, when you're sort of just babies, if you like, and toddlers are a really good example of this. They've not developed that frontal lobe. That frontal lobe develops up until sort of early mid-30s.
So, really? Oh my word!
Yeah. So I'm only just sort of coming out of that myself.
Well, I've just turned 40 and I feel like I've still got a long way to go. So what's my excuse?
But if you compare it to toddlers, they've not got any of that. They've not got that frontal lobe developed. They've not got a developed human. So what they've got is a chimp, which is focused on survival, which can only see here and now. So when you're walking it down the sort of shopping aisle in the supermarket, and it sees those Maltesers, that's all it wants, and it will kick and scream and use lots of emotions to try and get its way. And if it doesn't get it will think that that's the absolute end of the world.
You've just stumbled into my life right now, okay, Trevor, because my son has turned 3 today, and we were going out the door to the nursery, and he wants to open every door. And if you open it first, no, I want to do it. I want to open the door. And it is such an emotional and quick reaction. And actually, somebody who came up on Sunday said his mood changes so rapidly. He's really happy, light and joy, and really loves you to be with. And then something changes his mood, and suddenly the reaction is strong and fierce and angry and in your face, and 40 minutes of shouting and crying and the vein popping out of his neck with anger. And then he's back to the complete happiness again. So really, that's because the limbic brain is pretty much most of his brain right now.
That's what he's got. He's got chimp. And you've got that for another that's part of 30 years.
30 Well, Trevor, I'm so pleased you're here to tell me that, because I was hoping we'd only have a few more months of it. But great, thank you. No, but it is interesting how, seeing children develop. My daughter, who's 6, I can see how much more developed she is, and she's now got the conscience coming about, and she's very aware of truth telling and lying, and she's very much challenging that all the time and saying, I told this fib, but I'm really sorry, and has a conscience about doing something wrong. And that's really developed in her very strongly the last few months. So it's fascinating seeing kids as they grow up and how they change. But we, as adults, sometimes, regardless of if we're past our 30-year mark or not, we tend to be a bit confident in our rationality. But really, I think something that I love that Prof. Peter said before was that the chimp's been there longer than you have. And so the chimp's reaction is so strong and so immediate sometimes that you actually are kind of going along the driving seat. Like, I heard a really good description of this once where someone said, we think our brains are the Oval Office, when in actual fact it's the press office. We're trying to post-rationalize what we've already thought and our reactions. And even as adults, that's still the case, isn't it?
So whenever there's any situation that we're confronted with, it gets interpreted by both systems. So both your human and chimp have to have a look at what the situation is in front of it. Now, from a survival point of view, what the chimp part of our brain does is neurochemically it shuts down the human, because it has to have that first look.
Right.
That's a safety check. Is there an immediate threat to this situation that's presenting me in front of I'm presented with? So crossing the road, is there an immediate threat? Or being on this show, my chimp's telling me, is there an immediate threat here?
Yeah.
And it will look into its reference points. It will look into what we call the computer and see, what do we have any automatic programs about how to cope with a situation like this? So crossing the road, it looks into the computer, and it's got you look left, you look right, or it's got memory about, there was a hedgehog advert, wasn't there? about sort of crossing the road safely. It looks into that part and says, okay, this is what we do, and then everything just goes ahead automatically. If we don't have helpful things in that computer, or even worse, if we have unhelpful beliefs in that computer or unhelpful programs in that computer, it can be very much over to you, Chimp, do whatever you think, or even we're going to behave in a less helpful way. And it's then only after all of that happens that your human comes on board and says, oh, what have I done? Why did I copy everyone into that email? You know, that type of response, sort of that logical response, tends to only come on afterwards.
Incredible.
So good.
Delicious, really.
Delicious.
Yum.
Really good.
Oh, these are so tasty.
So in that case, I saw that in my daughter. So she loved dogs with a passion. And every time we see a dog, she had zero fear because, of course, you know, her computer is her long-term memory and it didn't have any records of dogs being a problem or in any way. Dogs were just good and fluffy and fun. So when she was about 3 years old, she'd be every dog she saw. That was it. She was straight in their face. And I was like, whoa, keep back. You know, you got to be careful here. Then one day when she was about 3 years old, there was a dog growling at her from a distance. She got really scared and I thought, oh no, I hope this doesn't shape her view of dogs now. And then she became terrified of dogs. And we've been trying since then to get her used to certain animals. Now, that's a natural learning process, isn't it? Things are not all safe. You have to learn there's danger. So you have like an extreme reaction one direction to all dogs are bad. And now you have to also learn that actually some dogs are bad or dangerous. Some dogs aren't dangerous. And you've got to learn that, haven't you? So our computer is always evolving, I suppose. But what's the difference between long-term fears and impacts we might know? For instance, the fridge picture, you know, the picture of your drawing on the fridge and your parents' reaction to that can have a massive impact on your whole life. That's what the book talks about, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe other things you might learn, which actually, you know, they can come and go and you can reform your computer, can't you? You're not actually like tied to the same beliefs and fears and hopes or whatever for the rest of your life. You can change those a little bit, can't you?
Yeah, one of the sort of brilliant things about the human brain is this idea of neuroplasticity, this idea that those pathways can be developed and changed over time through rehearsal, through practice, and through work. And it sounds like, I mean, the example you gave with your daughter and the dog is a really good one. So what gets the Chimp's appraised the situation and has globalized it and said it doesn't really take perspective. Let's keep that in mind. The Chimp doesn't see it like that. It very much is in black and whites. It's very much there about safety. So it says the safest thing to say is that all dogs are bad. All dogs are scary. And what can happen is the Chimp can go beyond that and say, well, all furry things are scary. And that's when phobias really start to get embedded because those belief systems are getting programmed into that computer.
Right. Okay.
So what we would do to try and untangle that, and there are lots of different approaches and methodologies to try and undo phobias. But one way of doing it is and how we do it within using the Chimp model, is to try and rewire those pathways, if you like, and try and look what's in that computer. So in the model, we talk about gremlins being in that computer. So unhelpful automatic beliefs being in that computer. What's in there? What's it based on? And actually testing it out, just giving some rationalizations to it. Proactively saying, well, what evidence is there to say that this is the case? What evidence is there to say that this is not the case? And you might end up with exactly what you said there, which is a more balanced position, which is, well, you do need to be careful. Some dogs might be scary, some dogs might be dangerous, but equally that doesn't mean that all dogs are scary and dangerous. Yeah. So there's a lot that we can do with the brain by rehearsing what's in that computer, by looking at those unhelpful automatic beliefs, those gremlins, and replacing them with what we call autopilot, so helpful automatic beliefs. And that doesn't just apply to phobias, it'll apply to, you know, we have it in all scenarios in our life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to go through now, if I can, some different examples. So now we've worked out these three different main parts of our brain: so the computer, with a human, with the chimp, and how they're all kind of reacting with each other to different situations. Can I just go through some different scenarios with you, and then we can just talk about, for instance, what part of the brain is doing what in that situation? Okay, and just break it down a little bit as to well, this part is reacting because of this. So okay, so the first one is you're driving to work in the morning. And you've kind of been stuck in traffic or roadworks. You're just starting to move away from the roadworks. You're a little bit stressed because you're running late, and then a car cuts in front of you, cuts the queue, has not been waiting in the traffic jam, but cuts through everyone and cuts you up. Okay, firstly, Trevor, what's your reaction, and what's going on there in your mind?
My personal law.
Well,
might be happening
in ones. Actually, I need to know more about you. Are you an angry person, Trevor? No. Yeah. What's going inside somebody's mind? We'll call him Bob. What's going through Bob's head?
So let's have this is a for instance, because everyone's unique and everyone is different. But we've got to assume that, if Bob's got a mind like everyone, because we're all like this, they've got a human, chimp, computer. So someone's cut them up, and the appraisal of that situation, the chimp sees it first and will shut down the human. So as much as his human might say, well, it doesn't make that much of a difference, or it might be able to sort of rationalize things and think with perspective and say, well, it hasn't really changed our driving time. We're still going to be late regardless, or it doesn't really matter too much because there are much more important things in life. The human's been shut off. So let's put that to one side first. So the chimp sees it, and the chimp will assess the situation. Now, it may be such a threat to the chimp. The chimp may perceive that as such an affront to its, depending on what their chimp's like, such an affront to their security, their safety, their power, their dominance, that actually the chimp just lets loose and gives a really sort of emotional response and reaction. Mm-hmm. It may be that, and that's that kind of immediate knee-jerk reaction. The chimp may look into the computer as well. If the chimp looks in the computer and actually what it's got in there is nothing particularly helpful about situations similar to this, so being cut up, it's not got anything particularly helpful to cope with it, or even worse still, it's got some negative automatic beliefs in there, some unhelpful automatic beliefs in there. One's about, one's about, let's make a stereotype. One's about masculinity and that people shouldn't cut me up. People should be respectful. People should drive in a certain way, and lots of people have those. Driving's a really good example. Lots of people have. We've all been taught how to do things with our hands at 10 and 2, but everyone's got there. This is how people should drive.
And status too, right? I was just thinking your status as, I'm just doing this and you show me such little respect that you cut me up, and my status is somehow damaged because of that, even though that's a ridiculous thing, because who's witnessing it? Who's seeing it? What's the status witnessed by whom? But actually the way you see yourself and your status being belittled, that can be really integral in your computer, can't it? You don't even know you think that way until someone tries to lower your status and you feel maybe angry.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of that kind of ego status is inbuilt in people's individual chimps, but actually, if you've got kind of chronic difficulties around esteem and trying to kind of prove yourself, that's in your computer. That can be a sort of another sort of trigger back. And then other preconceived beliefs about people who might drive, white cars versus black cars, or Audis or BMWs. We've got all those preconceived ideas in that computer. So Bob gets cut up. Chimp shuts everything down. Chimp looks over into the computer, and if the message that comes back is, "This is yet another person trying to walk over me. People shouldn't walk over me. People shouldn't drive that way. People should be taught a lesson, and all Audi drivers are the same." The chances of Bob's reaction being one that his human wants are less and less. The chances of Bob having a chimp reaction rather than a human response are much, much greater.
Right.
Now, what exactly a chimp reaction is depends on the individual. So some people's chimps will respond in a really angry and hostile way. And there are degrees of that, whether it be swearing at someone and making various gestures, whether it be, trying to drive dangerously yourself to cut them back up, and it goes on and on. Some people's chimps might just that might be too much for them. Emotionally, they might then feel quite sad. So the response from their chimp might be one that just breaks down and cries, and it's that's the sort of straw that breaks the camel back from them in that sense.
Yeah.
Or it may be that they get really sort of emotional and then start becoming quite really anxious, and then become avoidant of driving situations.
Yeah.
But all of those outcomes, I would assume, are far from what their human would want to do.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it, in this situation, boss human is saying, I need to get to work. I need to get to work, and I need to get to work safely.
Yeah. And also, I've had this before where, you know, that feeling where your human manages to kind of finally catch up with your chimp, and you sort of, okay, give it a scenario very similar to that. So I was walking out of Sainsbury's, pushing a trolley. I was texting my wife something, and I knew that between there and the escalator down to the car park, there's no signal. So I better get this message out now. And I think I was literally texting something quite important about our children as well. So it wasn't like I was just messing about on Facebook. This very sort of rude man came up behind me and said, would you mind moving out the way, please? Not just being on your phone all day long, or something very, very derogatory. And I was raging. I don't get angry. I'm a sort of very chill kind of person normally, but I was so angry. And I said, you're such a rude man. And considering I was actually walking at the time, I wasn't standing there. I was walking not as fast as he wanted to, because he wanted to get past me. And I was so tempted to then have it out with him in some way. I'm embarrassed saying it now, because I look back at it thinking, what was I thinking? But that's my point in a way. The human catches up afterwards. And my human brain then was able to rationalize that later. Who is he to me? I don't care what his opinion is, because I don't know him. His opinion doesn't mean to take anything or give anything to me in any way whatsoever. So why was I annoyed? And even talking about it, I'm quite embarrassed by my angry reaction. But at the time, I was ready for a stand down argument with the guy, because it is so instant. It's so out of character to me, it felt like, because I'm not that person. That's my chimp, which is part of me, but not me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It wasn't even you who was getting angry and annoyed. It's out of character for you. That was what your chimp was doing, and it will take you in a way that you wouldn't want to go, as in the real you. Your human doesn't want you there, but your chimp will take you there, because it's not thinking about consequence. It's thinking about here and now, and it's thinking about survival.
And he was also older than me. He was like 70 odd. So I was like, what's going to happen? Me taking on a 70-year-old man, that's humiliatingly embarrassing on me, that I was going to get that annoyed. I should have just let it go. But, but then at the time, your chimp's so strong.
This is normal. This is what the human mind does.
Yeah, and it's part of our survival, like you said. So in that case, Bob is probably going to get an emotional response. It could be lots of different things, but it's very likely to be a chimp reaction. It's less likely to be the rational human in him. Okay, let's go for another scenario, which is quite different to that. But again, you can see how these are going to be very kind of emotional reactions. So the next one I've got for you is for anybody here, let's just say they're called Sandra. Her partner leaves her after having an affair that she found out about. And as they go, they also take her own pot plant and take it away with them. So that's gone as they moved out. I added that little dimension at the end just to paint more of a picture, really. So what's going on in that situation, Trevor, with regards to the mind?
So same situation's happening again. And again, everyone's chimp. So Sandra's chimp Sandra's chimp, human and computer are all going to be slightly different. But the situation will first be interpreted by the chimp. Human gets shut down. So I suppose that ability to take a more level-headed inquiry as to what have been the ongoings here, to take that balanced look at, well, what factors are my factors, what factors are their factors, even to take perspective on it, to think about things, beyond the relationship, to think about, if this person's like this, should I want to be with them anyway? All that type of thing. That's very much kind of shut down. So as it immediately happens, I'd assume that Sandra's chimp will feel really quite threatened by that. Will feel that its support network, its troop, its sort of point of security has been taken away from it. May feel affronted by, again, I'm thinking in a really sort of tribal sort of way, maybe affronted by the idea that there's somebody out there who's taken from her. But we'll be looking into that computer again and seeing, and we all have, preconceived beliefs about values, about relationships built into that computer. So if and people people take things differently, but if the reference point for the chimp looking into that computer is one of the well, let's say that turn it a bit more positively. Let's say the reference point for Sandra was actually they were, in her computer. She has a very balanced understanding about relationships not being forever, and this is just someone's journey, and I'm actually stable outside of that relationship because I've got stability in myself. Or even let's say that Sandra had beliefs about open relationships. Then actually the message that goes back to the chimp is it's far more palatable for the chimp. Then you're far less likely to get a chimp reaction. The chimp it's easier to settle that chimp down, so the human can then come back on board and do that sort of more balanced weighing up of things. Yeah. If, however, what's in that computer, let's paint the picture slightly differently. If Sandra's childhood experience of relationships was a negative one, and mum and dad's relationship split up at an early age because of extramarital affairs, and that had a significantly negative impact on Sandra's upbringing and growing up. If Sandra's had previous difficulties in relationships, again, infidelity in relationships, or even in this relationship there's been infidelity, the response that you might get from the chimp based on those sort of inputs to the chimp, you can see that might be more prone to a chimp reaction rather than your chimp being more amenable to settling down. And equally, if Sandra's attachment is to that plant, or if it is about ownership, because chimps do get very territorial, that's when you tend to see those battles about, no, that was my t-shirt, not your t-shirt, or that was my plant, not that, and you get, the relationship breaks down, but the battle then becomes about the plant.
Yeah,
that's the reason I brought this up. More immediate.
Yeah, there is a reason why I brought this up, because I had an ex-girlfriend who, when she dumped me, for want of a better expression, she had lots of my DVDs. Now, I didn't have a DVD player, so this is like, I couldn't play these DVDs. There was no chance of me watching them ever again. And of course, this is like going back quite a few years, like a decade ago now. So, back then, little do we know that Netflix and streaming was about to happen. So actually, DVDs were going to become pretty redundant anyway. But it's almost the principle of, but that's my thing that I gave in a certain relationship that now you've taken from me. And I feel like I'm annoyed by that more than the relationship. But it's not true. It's just that was the physical, tangible thing that I could get my claws into to say, and the injustice is also that you've got my damn DVDs. That was like the sort of reaction from me, because it was territorial. It was the affront that she'd done. And that was the physical thing that I could kind of pin it onto.
Yeah, and it gets displaced. We're not, you're no longer talking about the issue at hand. The chimp globalizes, and it becomes about everything. It's not this balanced appraisal of what went right, what went wrong, and in most cases there's a bit of wrong on both sides. It's not that balanced appraisal. It's very much, these are all the things that this person did wrong. And I'm going to win, because chimps do like to win. They like it's all about winning.
Yeah.
So they will find a way to sort of win. And it's, bringing it back to kids, it's not dissimilar to kind of the sort of arguments that kids have about who can play with what toy. And you end up with, I've got two myself, one who's taken literally just too many things to be able to hold, let alone play with.
Just to make the point.
Just to win. Just to win.
Yeah. I think we've all been there, haven't we? It's just a shame when you're an adult still doing it. But yes. Okay, now let's relate this to food next. So I've got the final example. We'll call this person Colin, or you could call him Dan for that matter. And I think this relates to a lot of us actually with food. So, you are someone who, Colin is somebody who has, a really good food plan in place. And it doesn't really matter what that is for this example. Let's say they're following a certain way of eating. You could call it a diet, but it's not a temporary thing. They've decided to do this for the rest of their life for whatever reason. They're driving along. They see the golden arches on the horizon as they're driving. And even though they've got the best of intentions, and even though they've got it all set up that they're not going to eat the food from that particular food distributor, they suddenly find themselves driving through the drive-through, and they think, okay, well, I'm only going to order the the chicken pieces, because at least that's high protein and that matches my program. So I'm going to go for that option. And then before they know it, they can actually see they've got they've got a flurry type dish in their hand. Okay, a McFlurry in their hand. They've got the Coke and it's the full sugar version. They've got the burger, the bun, the chips, the ketchup, the chicken pieces on top. Everything's going on there. And they eat it all and they really enjoy the meal. And then they have that regret afterwards. So what's happened there? Because I think that's probably relatable to a lot of people on this planet right now.
Yeah, this is that's an example that sounds remarkably familiar. I very much been there. That's very much a struggle. I think that a lot of people have. When it comes to again, if you think about it from the model's perspective, the chimp's going to shut out the human. So no matter what the food plan is, so the human's there with his food plan trying to say, oh no, what about my food plan? What about this? We've got a meal ready at home for us. That's all. As soon as the golden arches are seen, that's shut off because the chimp gets to see it first. And the chimp is thinking about here and now and survival. And the chimp wants, high sugar foods. It wants high fat, high salt. It wants all of those things that give it a wonderful dopamine pleasure buzz. So the human doesn't come online till much later, usually after everything's been ordered. And then you get those kind of, so part of that human brain does have a thinking part to it. So it does have, there's a sort of outcrop of the limbic system into our frontal lobes, which can then give you this kind of pseudo logic. So, I've ordered it now, and it'll be a waste to get rid of it.
Be a waste, yeah.
It'll be a waste. There, yeah. So it's just once, and before this is all justification. As you said, if I just have the chicken, then that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I do need to, I need to keep hydrated. So let's get that Coke as well. And food there are such powerful drives for our chimp around food, and such powerful reward circuitry in the brain around food that kind of to sort of talk about food addiction is that's probably the closest thing to it. The sort of processes, particularly in terms of dopamine hits, is not too dissimilar. So your chimp's going to win all the time when it comes to that. This idea of willpower and just willing our chimps to not go into that fast food outlet, it just doesn't work. And even when you have got plans in place, like a food plan in place, it can still overtake. Your chimp can still overtake. I know, for example, going around the supermarket without a shopping list is much worse than going around with a shopping list. But even with a shopping list, a few things find their way in. And that's the chimp at play.
Definitely. I think I can certainly relate to that. We went to a family barbecue once. This is years and years ago. So I think if I say it now in the family here, they're not going to be upset anymore. But went to a family barbecue and my wife and I stopped off at a fast food place on the way. This is way before we knew about low carb, by the way. Certainly before I knew about this book. And we had a meal and we were really full and they went to the barbecue and we were like, we're not really hungry. And I felt really guilty afterwards. Like, that was ridiculous. People were cooking a meal for us. Well, it was really rude. And we'd filled ourselves up with a load of junk food, and then we couldn't actually go to this beautiful barbecue. By the way, my wife's family are Iraqi. They do the most beautiful kebabs and marinated meats. It was stunning food. It wasn't like I didn't even want that food. And I'd had the rubbish food beforehand, and I thought, well, obviously I know now what happened. I literally there and then, I wasn't thinking, the chimp wasn't going, hang on a minute, Dan, in 2 hours from now, you're going to be eating a beautiful barbecue. It was like, no, right now, you're not even that hungry, are you? But you just get it. Come on, what's the worst that can happen? You'll have both meals. Woohoo, party time. And of course you can't, and you feel guilty, rightfully so. And then you sort of think, I've let myself down there. And you think, well, I've got a weight problem, because those moments are happening. But just on saying that, Trevor, I just want to just say this. People might think then that perhaps we're saying, and we're definitely not, that the chimp part of our brain is the excuse for bad behavior or excuse for never being able to change. And it's not true, is it? Because actually, this whole book is about how to manage the chimp not how to suppress, not how to ignore, to manage the chimp and appreciate it's an essential part of how your brain works, but it doesn't mean it's got complete free reign to run the brain, does it? So let's talk about the management in those situations too.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Steve's been really clear, and it's clear within all of our material that this is not an excuse model, not at all. A better way to look at it is having a chimp's like having a pet. For example, having a dog. If the dog goes and bites someone, you're still responsible as the owner. It's no good to say, well, it's a dog, it bites people.
It's a dog. Yeah. Sorry.
We've got to accept that we've got this chimp, and everyone's chimp is different, and some people's chimps are going to bite more, some people's chimps are going to be more anxious, some people's chimps have got real drivers towards food, some people's don't. Everyone's is different and everyone's is unique, but it's on us to actually recognize that and to sort of do things to manage our chimp and to help it. Again, a bit like looking after a toddler.
Yeah. So what are those? Let's go through them then. So say, for instance, the food is a great example for me. So, I just got to be completely honest here and a bit vulnerable, but I think it's important. So chicken, for instance, is okay. I don't go crazy for chicken. I like it. It's nice in dishes. You put breading around it and it changes from being okay to just, oh my goodness, I want to eat that thing. Kentucky Fried Chicken's just ridiculous. And if I try and have it without the coating, it's nowhere near as good, is it? So what can I do then, do you think? What sort of strategy could I have to stop my chimp being quite so persistent in getting that breaded chicken?
Okay, so what can you do? I think, first off, I think insight is really key. So understanding that you've got these two systems at play is really key. That actually you're there, you know what you want, your human is really clear, but actually this idea of willpower is never going to work. You need to work with and manage this acceptance that we got this chimp and that we're going to need to sort of do something with it is important. I think the next thing I'd say is we've got to give ourselves a break as well. I think one of the nice things about the model is that we're not sort of blaming ourselves for everything. We've got an understanding and an explanation for things. What tends to happen with diets, as opposed to kind of longer, lifelong journeys of nutrition, what tends to happen with diets is that we're measuring ourselves. Chimp will measure itself against unrealistic parameters and doesn't have that longitudinal view. So as soon as you have a lapse, or as soon as, so we know, for example, body weight fluctuates, throughout the day from, week to the next, and there are so many factors associated with it. But if your chimp is using body weight as its marker of success, and it's using body weight on a single occasion as its marker of success or failure on a diet, that's a hugely vulnerable position to be in, because our body weight fluctuates.
Completely agree. You know what? I just think sometimes people think they've got a target weight to get to, and it might work for them. But I think the problem is what happens the day after they hit their target weight. Like you've hit it now. How do you maintain that? Was it a short burst you went through, and now your brain's going to say, "Let's chow down because you've earned this." It's whereas actually trying to make a pattern in your life, which is a habit eventually, and that habit becomes, in your computer, I guess, just using the terminology from the book, in your computer, it becomes, oh yeah, in this situation, we don't do this because, and we get used to that and we train ourselves into a habit. That I think you are your habits, good and ill. And I think, by training yourself into a habit of how you're going to eat the rest of your life is probably essential, actually, rather than a short term, by the 1st of July, I will weigh this much. And on the 2nd of July, I don't know what I'm going to do, and then it's going to fall apart probably.
It's not even kind of, I guess there's hitting the target, but every time, any day on that progress, on that journey, if your weight changes and goes the wrong way, I say the wrong way, I'm using that term deliberately, but goes in the way that you don't want it to go, your chimp will think that's a failure. So because it's a failure, all my efforts are not worth it. I should pack it in. And then this is when you get yo-yo dieting. This is what sort of comes out of that.
Do you know me really well, Trevor? Because this is exactly what goes into my head. It's that kind of thing. It's people. Yeah, exactly. And it's just understanding yourself, isn't it? So it's that thing of, it doesn't matter if you've had 2 weeks of amazing success and it's just going really well. The one trip can be the thing to make you go, what's the point? Oh, I'm going to walk away. And actually, the other thing is that as well is novelty, right? So, you can start anything for a certain period of time, and there's a novelty factor that very quickly wears away, and your chimp's almost like, we've done that now. What are you doing? Let's do the next fun thing. But actually,
Chimps love a bit of novelty. That's
Yeah,
again,
they do.
this is why diets succeed. Chimps love novelty. The next diet on, oh, this sounds great. I'll buy the new book. Lovely treat for my chimp. Or with exercise, I'll buy all the gear. Everyone gets really excited. And then 2 weeks in, not going to do that. Not going to do that anymore. That's a bit boring now. And it's like, I keep coming back to dogs, but when you first get a dog, it's great. It's really exciting. I'm going to walk it all the time. 2 weeks in, when it starts pouring it down outside, we'll skip it today. And that's what starts to happen. And that's what your chimp starts to do. It's very much your chimp that sort of sees things on that shorter term basis without that longitudinal perspective and without the ability to appraise things in a balanced way and say that actually on this, the reason we're making these changes to our nutrition overall is for wider ranging reasons. And it's not just about a single parameter that we're going to measure ourselves on. It's actually more that sort of longitudinal audit. So I suppose what just coming back to kind of what you can do about it, I think it's so important to give ourselves a break, because otherwise your chimp will things don't go well all the time. That's a fact of life. So when things do slip, if we don't give ourselves a break, if we're too critical, that's when sort of our mental well-being starts to suffer, and we then try to find comfort in overeating, for example, and that's all based in what's in our computer about our relationships with food as well. Insight, giving yourself a break. I think seeing things as that longer term journey rather than a flash in the pan diet. I think it's really important with all plans to make sure they are human led but chimp friendly. Right. So your human can write down a really sensible, logical diet plan or exercise plan or whatever it may be, and it can say these are the points, these are what we need to do, and that all looks really sensible on paper. But if that's so onerous and so difficult that your chimp will look at the first few lines of it and say, I can't do that, then the plan doesn't get off the ground. So that's why people tend to say, well, start small, start with something really small, make one small change, and build from there, rather than say I'm going to do all of these things. So I definitely say the plan should be that way around. I think one of the really important things to do is, and one thing that's really helpful in making changes is using the community around you. So using what we call your troop. So these are people who are who have got your back, your friends and family who are there for you no matter what. They can be a real source of support to talk about things. We know that when we don't express our chimps and don't talk about what the problems are, it makes it really hard to do that reflection and actually make those plans of what changes we need to make. But also, if you are feeling a bit down or struggling, actually it's your troop that will, every time sort of just pull you up and hold you up so that things don't go necessarily completely off the rails. And we've seen this with diet and exercise and people trying to make effective changes in their life. When you do it with a group of friends, when you've got a community, and I wonder if the work that you've done there is exactly that. This idea of a community. Actually, you can help each other on the way. You can share ideas. You can share stories. You can share struggles. I think that's really key, because what we're doing with that is actually we're helping the chimp settle itself down. What else to do?
Well, I've got an idea actually that I've tried. I just want to bounce this past you for a sec for diet, because I've had a real problem with my sleep. And when I say a problem with my sleep, I go to bed ridiculously late, and then like 2 a.m, if I had my way. And then my son and my daughter, who are quite young, especially my son who just turned 3 today, when they wake up in the morning, it's early hours, and so I might have had 4 to 5 hours sleep. And I've been doing that for years. And there's also my business I run, I was baking at night. So I got into the habit of doing it. And so my problem is, I know what my chimp's like. I just want to be in the here and now. So I'll stay up late at night, working or just scrolling or just nonsense sometimes. But my chimp doesn't care about tomorrow morning. It's literally, I'm in the moment. I'm enjoying this. I love being up to this time of night. I'll deal with the morning in the morning. And in the morning, I wake up thinking, I shouldn't have done that again. What am I doing? So what I do is I do a countdown which I think I read in the book helps. And I'm going to try it with food as well. So to give yourself that little bit of a break between your decision making and whatever it is in front of you, just to give yourself a countdown to let your brain switch to, if possible, the human as quick as possible. So I'll say, I'm going to bed in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And before I even know what's happened, I'm already up. I'm already walking towards my bedroom thinking, oh, I'm doing it. Okay, I never thought this would happen. And before I know, I'm always starting to treat myself like a parent to myself.
That's it.
And making it happen before I've even realized I've done it. And then I'm in bed thinking, well, I'm here now. So what are you going to do? Get up and walk out of bed? I might as well just stay here. And it sounds so weird when you say that out loud. I mean, even saying that sounds a bit embarrassing. Like I'm talking to myself in that way, but it definitely works. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're doing there is kind of, again, parenting yourself. So looking after your chimp and breaking down those steps, giving that delay time. So to have that insight, it's actually my chimp that's trying to keep me up now, or it's actually my chimp that's taking me this way. What do I want? Just giving yourself that moment to what do I actually want in this situation, and breaking down those steps and almost making it difficult for your chimp to do what it wants to do. Again, with if I don't go into the fast food eatery, or if I don't have certain things in my fridge, then it's a bit of an effort. My chimp will say, well, it's a bit of an effort to go out to the supermarket to buy a tub of ice cream, for example. If it's just not there, it makes life a bit easier. Or if you break down those steps to what you need to get, just that little bit easier. I think the other thing to say is that amidst all of this, looking after yourself in terms of your mental well-being, I'm really, really clear that if you're not in a good place mentally, anything that you try, regardless of what it is, regardless of whether it's eating healthily and looking after your health and your physical health, it's much easier when you're in a good place mentally.
Yeah.
Relationships with food, I think, are so closely linked to that. So if people are isolated or not doing so well in themselves, it's so tempting for your chimp to find comfort in whichever way it can. And a lot of our food scripts or autopilots and gremlins around food have been inbuilt from so young in our childhood. We comfort children all the time with food because, babies, they eat, they sleep, and they give you dirty nappies. Those are the three things. And if there's a problem, what do? You change the nappy, you give it a bottle or give it some breast milk and then get it down to sleep. So what we're learning from a very early age is this idea that if you're not in a good place or you're crying, let's comfort you with some food. So it's been so inbuilt in our sort of psychological dialogue as we grow up that when we're struggling with ourselves emotionally on a day-to-day basis, or if we're not in a great place, it's no wonder that we might sort of find ourselves in a box of chocolates quite quickly as a means of trying to give ourselves comfort. That's not really comfort. We've got to get to the bottom of the problems and understand our mind and address whatever those stresses are underneath it. And then finally, I think it's just important to maintain perspective and values and really link what you do with what's important in life. So again, if I use the example of exercise, there are people who attain great feats in exercise, or starting to run a marathon or whatever, and it's usually because they link it in with some personal cause to them. So if you're doing something for charity, for example, because it's a matter that's close to your heart, or you've lost a family member recently, or you're trying to be healthy because actually you realize that your family heart and cardiac risk factors are really high, so you're trying to link it all in with that. That's got a much greater chance of getting both human and chimp buy-in as compared to, well, I want to lose a stone.
Right. Yeah.
So I think those are the things that I'd say might be sort of helpful as sort of starting points, as approaches.
I love it. And I was going to talk about the troop, which you mentioned there, because just yesterday, a great example of this. And I just want to just say this to the listeners who, well, firstly, thank you so much, because you are listening week in, week out. And that really, the support you give me by telling me that means a lot. But yesterday in particular, it had a massive impact on me, where somebody tweeted saying they'd lost lots and lots of weight in the last 8 months. And they thanked me as one of the names on there as part that, part of her journey that helped her on the way. And I just want to say to, those people who do that, you help me as well, because, I'm not turning up here spouting from on high saying I've got the answers, do as I tell you, but rather I see us as in this together. And I think the Troop model is really important, because knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you have support out there and that people can share their stories and that can inspire you, that inspires me. And I hope that it means I can bring these people to inspire you, and we all help each other. And I think that's what's one thing about apes generally, but also humans in particular, is an essential human quality of communal spirit and pulling together and on the journey together. I think and it's been proven actually, if you look at sort of narcotic studies about drug abuse and drug addiction, quite often addiction can be very closely associated with being isolated. Even if you think about the chemical reactions that are going on in the body, actually the brain reactions to being isolated can be much more likely leading towards addiction. And food, of course, can be a very quick addiction that all people can get into. So I just want to say the troop there of this community has been really beneficial to me. And I think that's why this works, because hopefully it helps you all listening to know that you're not alone and that we're all in this together. And, I'm as much chimp as anyone. So I will have these stumbles. And I think, like you said, then don't beat yourself up. Get up. What do you want to do? Because actually, then this is the story of hope here. At the beginning, you said about if you wrote on paper, what are your values? Because that's actually who you are. That is really important to reflect on. I want to go back to that if we can, because that idea of who we actually are and what the chimp is not who we are, I think gives us real hope for tomorrow. What you see yourself as and the values you hold are you. So you should celebrate that and try to honor that as best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we often get those two areas just so muddled. I would say that, the chimp's not all bad at all. And when we're talking about the troop, that troop drive, that is actually all your chimp. And there are lots of real positives to your chimp. It's just a matter of knowing when to harness them. And when it comes to kind of that sense of community, all sort of grouping together and helping people through things, that can actually be both your human and your chimp. Those human values about that importance of looking after your fellow man, but also that also fits in with troop drives from a chimp point of view. So there are real positives there, and what we can do with the model and what we do with the model is actually not only get to a point where we're managing the chimp when it's getting in the way, but also being able to harness some of those positives of the chimp to help us through things.
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to ask you in that case, Trevor, about the next book. So the great thing about the Chimp Paradox is that I think you learn a lot about yourself and about how you work. But there's a follow-up book, isn't there, that I really want to read next, because this doesn't really necessarily tell you how to implement the changes necessarily, does it? So do you want to tell us about
absolutely? This is the new book. So this is A Path Through the Jungle. It's available now. It's a lot more detailed. It really, as compared to the Chimp Paradox, I think it takes some of the ideas from the Chimp Paradox. It expands on them. Steve's added lots of additional neuroscience in there. There's a lot of, I think the things that I find really helpful in there are, there's a lot of case examples, just to help you relate to it, but also lots of exercises to sort of go away and work with. The Chimp Paradox is, I think, perhaps a bit of an easier and lighter read. The Path Through the Jungle, there's definitely a lot to gain from there and to interact with it. So yeah, absolutely well worth a read.
Fantastic. I'm going to check that out for sure. It only came out in October this year, didn't it? So
yeah,
it's really recent.
Really recent.
Yeah, great. And if you go to chimpmanagement.com, that's the main website for the group, right? So you can probably, or should I call you the troop? I don't know. So you can actually go on there, you can learn about some of this stuff, and there's some videos and things, aren't there?
Yeah, there are some resources there. You can get in touch with us just with any inquiries and queries. We do one-to-one sort of mentoring to sort of help people through specific areas if they've gone through things and actually have thought, well, actually I'm struggling with this bit, can you explain that? We also we do have an area which is a sort of learning platform called The Troop, which people can sign up to. And Steve and various mentors do kind of workshops and videos kind of online, and there's a forum there where people can talk all things chimp.
Great, excellent. So this book, I just want to say, and if Prof. Steve Peters hears this as well, it had a huge impact on me. I think it just made me start understanding how I work. And when you know that, you're never going to get to the stage where you just, your chimp is really nicely managed all the time and everything works absolutely swimmingly well, because, you go in and out of things, don't you? You kind of, you're very aware of this book in the summer when I read it. And then a few months later, you think, oh, that was my chimp who just did that earlier on. I just didn't see it at the time because, it's part of my brain. Of course it is. But I think understanding this model really helps you understand you and then how you work. So, sometimes, I've always said this on the podcast, transformation stories are great because they're inspirational. You get to celebrate someone's success, but actually that's a bit temporary. And I think learning the Chimp Paradox principles of how to live the rest of your life in a certain way, I think that's really valuable. And this book is so precious to me. And I think the next one will be as well. So I look forward to reading that because I think it's, understanding you is a really important part of being a human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree completely.
Yeah. So, Dr. Trevor Gedeon, it's been really wonderful today talking to you about all of this. And to the listeners, I hope it really helps you. Like I said, if you want to check out the Chimp Paradox, you can get it on all different book platforms online, etc. Ethical ones and less ethical ones. And if you want to check out the website as well, go and check out chimpmanagement.com. And if you want to follow either Dr. Trevor Gedeon today, he is the Chimp Doc at the Chimp Doc on Twitter, and at Chimp Management is the handle for them on Twitter. So check them out as well. I've actually made, I'm going to be making, I keep saying this and I don't find the time, some TikTok videos of my inner chimp, which I actually call Dom, and I call my human Dan. And I actually thought it was a nice little dynamic to have. So I don't know if I've actually got it to hand. I have it over there. I'll show you afterwards. I actually have a hoodie with a chimp on it, and I'm going to wear sunglasses with the hoodie, and that's my Dom having the instant reaction to something, and then my Dan like in the background, like, "Whoa, do you really want to be doing that?" Because I think those sorts, that would be a really good way to get the message out there about this in a very accessible piece of content. And I think TikTok would be great for that, with a quick, flick between the two cameras and the two people. So anyway, so I'll be working on those soon. And if you see them and you think, "What am I talking about?" This is the episode where he explained it all. Anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Trevor. It's been really, really lovely talking to you today. And hopefully you come back on again in the future. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.